Vivek, Tankha? Yes, thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Vice Chairman. We are, of course, supporting the bill, and there are issues that are good about this bill, and there are issues which I would like to flag. There are issues which are laudable and good about this bill, and there are issues which I would like to flag, maybe for future consideration. First of all, let me welcome this bill because this field of law in India had not been addressed for a long time. We had an Act of 1861, we had an Act of 1891, and then we had an Act of 1891. Three very old, century-old acts which had been in place in this country for more than a century. Something new had to be done because this is a dynamic field, and this field is an expanding field. Maritime business is growing in India and worldwide. So this bill was a need of the hour in a sense. But while welcoming this bill, I would also say that we need to develop this field of law a lot more in this country. Even today, the field of law in this country is more dependent on English cases. We have not developed that expertise in India as of yet on maritime, which we should have by this time. But I'm sure this bill will take a step forward in that direction. I'm also happy that we have expanded the jurisdiction by Section 6. Earlier, the jurisdiction was mostly in rem. Now the jurisdiction is in addition in personam. That is, individuals can also have grievances. So this is a very welcome sign, which this bill indicates. Similarly, I welcome the expansion of jurisdiction to new courts, new high courts. Earlier, this maritime law was confined to 3 charter high courts of Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. And that went on for a century. But now you've added Karnataka, Gujarat, Orissa, Kerala, Hyderabad. And by notification, other high courts can also be added, which also is a very welcome sign because these states also have ports. These states also had disputes. And for their disputes, they would have to go to just one of the 3 high courts which had jurisdiction. But where I could maybe fault the bill is that in Section 9, in exercise of the maritime jurisdiction, the bill, as per the priority of claims, gives lesser priority to claims of loss of life and higher priority to claims of wages. I personally feel that a claim of life is bigger than the claim of wages. So when the High Court in its jurisdiction has to start disbursing the claim, it would first disburse it to for wages. And if anything remains, then it would go for loss of life. Now this, I feel, is something which needs to be addressed by the Honorable Minister, because loss of life today, I would put it on a higher pedestal than wages. First, it should have been loss of life, followed by wages. Also, another point which I feel is missing in the bill, which could be addressed in future, and which would be good for the industry also, is we have no mechanism in the bill for pre-litigation settlement. Now, pre-litigation settlement is a very important facet of legal jurisprudence these days. Why do you want to start a case? A case, when it goes on trial, takes a very long time. There are many cases which can be settled at a pre-trial stage. Now, abroad, this is very common. In criminal law, you have plea bargaining. Similarly, in civil law, you can also reach settlements between the counsels. So if there is a mechanism, a sort of a permanent mechanism for pre-litigation settlement, I'm sure it will help the parties to to have the dispute settled earlier than what is envisaged through a trial. I am also of the view that we have given the original jurisdiction in this bill to the high courts. Now today, in an era of tribunals, because tribunals are more specialized than high courts in terms of area of study, if we had a tribunal in which we have a specialist member and a judge, like we have in company law, like we have in other fields of law, it would be a good gain for the jurisprudence that you have a tribunal which takes up the original jurisdiction first, decides the matter, and then it travels in appeal to the High Court. What we have done through this bill is to give High Court original jurisdiction in all these cases, which means, one, you are overburdening the High Court once again, and two, the High Courts may not have that specialized knowledge of maritime law, because those are judges who have come from the bar or who may have come from subordinate judiciary, where maritime law necessarily was not a big component of their work. So I feel that this is also a case where maritime tribunals could have been set up, and an appeal from the maritime tribunal could have gone to the High Court. I mean, these are areas which can be addressed in the times ahead, because if we are expanding the jurisdiction of any law, the expanse has to come through specialized knowledge. I have seen in my own experience of law, when we established the state administrative and central administrative tribunals, the way the service law expanded at that time was much more than what we had seen in high courts. Similarly, now we see in company law tribunal, we see in other tribunals, there is a lot of NGT, for instance. Now, the kind of work NGT is able to do for environment, you can't expect high courts to do that, because they would never have that knowledge. So I would really commend in future that if the government could think and bring an amendment to bring a maritime tribunal against which appeals would go to High Court. I'm also happy to say that this is a new branch of expanding law which has been addressed after a century. So there is no reason not to support such an initiative, because it is good for the country. But with this initiative, we should take it forward in a manner that our country also becomes one of the prominent countries in maritime law, and the case law and the knowledge that would get reflected in judgments would then be quoted abroad. Today, most times in maritime law, when we argue cases, we are only citing cases which have been decided abroad, mostly in English law. But there is very little reference to Indian law. So this is a beginning, a very good beginning. We appreciate this beginning, but let us take this beginning forward with some more steps so that India gains its position of primacy in maritime law. Thank you.
Thank you.